Good afternoon. As the provost has stated, I'm greeting you virtually from my new home office in California. I am enjoying the sunshine, and I am not the least bit upset that I missed your recent snow. I was hired as the seminary's associate professor of intercultural studies in 2006. Jim Edwards was the president, and David Sebastian was the dean of the School of Theology. My interview the first week of December 2005 was an all-day exhausting experience, much like many of you have been through. Two things continue to stand out in my mind. The first was a noontime gathering of the seminary faculty. I was asked, do you teach a subject or do you teach a student? And that seemed like a rather strange question until someone actually explained that there had been an ongoing discussion, or maybe a disagreement, among the faculty, and what they really wanted to know was which side I would come down on. All kinds of things went through my mind in that flash of a second that I had to respond. I was finally able to state that I hope to create an atmosphere in the classroom where students can learn the information I share. Now, I could immediately tell that there were those who appreciated my step around the controversy, but there were also those who wished I'd actually stepped in. I would say that after 15 years, I continue to believe that whether we are in a physical classroom or a virtual one, we must create an atmosphere where students are able to learn the information that we share. The second incident that sticks out in my mind was the final interview piece with Sebastian and Edwards. Sebastian had been with me basically all day long, and as we walked over to Edwards' office, he asked me if I had ever met President Edwards before. I said yes. The last time was during a West Coast ministers meeting. Yes, I am originally from the West Coast too. At a West Coast ministers meeting that had been hosted at the South Bay Church of God in Torrance, where my husband and I were pastoring at the time. What I didn't tell Sebastian was that Edwards also spent several days with us in Kenya during a board meeting of the Kima International School of Theology. You see, there was an incident because water was in short supply. That's not a really unusual situation at that time of year without a rain catchment system. The alternative that we have with short water supply is that we close the bathroom in our house, and we ask visitors, all 18 of them, to use the pit latrine, which was very clean. President Edwards asked me very quietly, "Me too?" And I said, "Yes, sorry. We need the water for drink and to cook, not flush." So when we arrived at President Edwards' office that day of the interview, Sebastian asked President Edwards if he remembered me. Edwards' response was, "Yes, she's the only person who ever told me to my face where to go." I smiled. Sebastian looked confused, and Edwards simply followed up with, "Please sit down, let's chat." The story was never told to Sebastian, as far as I know. And if Edwards happens to be listening to this, he'll probably be chuckling at the memory. Having lived as a missionary, I have a particular perspective on intercultural studies and cultural competency. I required all of my Tri-S groups to do some very specific cross-cultural training before each trip. Some of the students were not overjoyed with that. But I'm also sure that my classes over the years have gotten weary of my East African illustrations. I was asked to become Dean of the Chapel my second year at the seminary. Gilbert Stafford had served in that role for a number of years previously. We did not know then, but he was already sick with the cancer that ultimately took his life. I was also directing the chapel choir and teaching the only seminary worship class, Theology and Leadership of Worship. I was delighted to do all of these pieces because I'd been a worship pastor. And I honestly thought that moving to the seminary I would have to leave all of that behind. Dean Sebastian retired at the close of the 2013-14 academic year. James Lewis became the dean, and I was asked to take on James' responsibility as assistant dean and director of the Doctor of Ministry program. When James resigned to take a pastorate in Houston, Texas, 2 years later, I was asked to step into the dean responsibility. Now, I'd been the dean at KIST, and I'd moved KIST through an accreditation process, so I thought, no problem, I can do this. The simultaneous consolidation of the undergrad department of Bible and Religion and the School of Theology that year, though, created some difficulty that I did not anticipate. You see, there were some negative attitudes from some of the faculty stemming from difficulties of years past, and there were feelings of some distrust since they were told rather than asked to join into a single unit. The consolidation also required that faculty move offices, some of whom had held their office for way more than a decade. Now, I was entering my 11th year at the seminary, so I wasn't a total newbie, but I hadn't a clue about the earlier issues. So I went into this piece absolutely blind. I also didn't really have a clue about all of the processes and procedures of the undergrad, because up until that time, the School of Theology had functioned independently, though we were attached to AU. The School of Theology had handled all of its own recruitment and admission, financial aid, scholarships, and endowments, and I understood the process that we had been using. Not only were faculty moved into new spaces, but all of those support structures changed as well. They were consolidated into undergrad offices that were handling these. It makes sense, but many of these offices didn't really know what to do with us. We also had 3 new faculty that year, and honestly, had it not been for the prayers and encouragement of people like Eugene Rube, retired seminary president, and Ann Smith, retired missionary, I don't think I would have survived the first year. I was encouraged by them to hang in there, and things were marginally better the second year. I was able to write some new financial aid policy for seminary students, negotiate some assistance in recruitment and admissions, and we received another 10-year accreditation from the Association of Theological Schools that spring. This past January, we saw the very first seminary cohort making significant use of the endowment. And I must say thank you, Willoughby Vaughters and Kim, for enabling this reality. We're also seeing the work on some congregational partnerships come to fruition. Hopefully, we'll see a new group in 21-22 that is beyond our imagination. When Gil Stafford retired, he passed on an orange checkered tie. James Lewis wore it once before he passed it on to me. I have not worn it for obvious reasons. And since the decision was made to sunset the DMIN program, I had no one to pass it on to anyway. So Nathan Willoughby, it's hanging on the drawer pull on the file cabinet in your new office. Have fun. One other piece from Gil Stafford when he retired. He shared 10 themes that he bequeathed to the seminary and to the church. Number 8 in that list says this: we are called to be good stewards of the historic vision of the Church of God, but for the benefit of the whole church. This vision includes both unity and holiness, both vertical and horizontal reconciliation, both personal experience and doctrine, neither one without the other. And I would add that we must continue to lean into the purpose for which Anderson Bible Training School was created, equipping women and men for the ministry of biblical reconciliation in every and all vocations and contexts. SOTCM faculty, I have nothing to leave you except my gratitude. We were required to make significant changes in a very short time frame, including losing friends and colleagues, making curriculum changes 3 times in a single year, and yet we remain effective in preparing ministers across the spectrum of ministry opportunities. We have also provided the opportunity for all of our undergrads to understand the Bible beyond a Sunday school lesson. If you take time to check current locations of our SOTCM graduates, you will see that we have vocational ministers and ministries around the globe. You, my friends, are worthy of your hire, and I'm thankful that I've had an opportunity to work with you. I pray God's best to you as you continue to serve this place. Good day.